Have you ever caught yourself in the mirror and thought, when did my jawline change? Maybe you noticed a little extra softness beneath your chin, or the elegant angle of your neck isn't quite the same as it used to be. If that moment has ever made you pause, let me start by saying this: you're not alone, and you're not imagining it. After 50, every woman begins to notice subtle shifts in her face and neck. It's not a flaw. It's a natural, universal part of aging. Our skin loses elasticity, gravity becomes more noticeable, and the features that once felt sharp and defined begin to soften. But here's the part most women don't realize. Your haircut plays a huge role in how those changes show up to the world and to yourself. The wrong hairstyle can unintentionally highlight sagging, widen the jawline, or draw attention downward. On the other hand, the right cut has the power to visually lift your features, elongate your neck, and bring the eye back to the places that tell your true story: your eyes, your smile, your expression. Hair is more than just a style, it's the frame for your face. And when that frame is chosen wisely, it doesn't just make you look good, it makes you feel radiant, confident, and elegant again. That's exactly what today's video is about. I'm not here to tell you what's in or out in the fashion magazines. Instead, I'll share with you the hairstyles you may want to avoid if you're dealing with a double chin, sagging neck, or softening jawline. And more importantly, I'll show you smart alternatives that actually work. Along the way, I'll bring in real examples, stories from women just like you, and professional tips that can make an immediate difference. So stay with me, because what you're about to learn might completely change the way you see yourself the next time you look in the mirror. Hairstyle 1: the blunt jawline bob. Let's start with one of the most common hairstyles women over 50 still gravitate toward: the blunt bob that stops right at the jawline. On the surface, it looks like such a chic, timeless choice. It's polished, easy to maintain, and you'll see it on countless celebrities and magazine covers. But here's the problem: when a haircut ends exactly at your jawline, it directs the eye to the very area that many of us would rather not spotlight. Think about it: the human eye naturally follows where a line finishes, and when your hair cuts off right at your chin, that becomes the focal point. For women who are noticing softening around the jaw, a bit of jowl, or a slight double chin, the blunt bob unintentionally creates a literal frame around the area. Instead of lifting, it can box your features in, make the jawline appear wider, and shorten the neck. I remember one of my clients, Susan, who came to me feeling frustrated. She was 62, vibrant, full of energy, but every time she looked in the mirror, she felt like her haircut was betraying her. She had worn a sharp, blunt bob for decades because it had always made her feel sophisticated. But as her face began to change with age, that same bob was no longer flattering. She told me, "I feel like my haircut is pointing out everything I want to hide." And she was right. When we placed her in front of the mirror and traced where the eye landed, it was directly at her jawline, exactly where she was most self-conscious. The solution wasn't to abandon the bob entirely. In fact, the bob is one of the most versatile cuts out there. The secret was in adjusting it to work for her current face shape. We let the bob fall just below her chin, adding about 1.5 inches of length. That tiny adjustment shifted the focal point downward, away from the jawline, and immediately gave her neck a longer, more graceful appearance. I also introduced soft, subtle layers in the front. Nothing too dramatic, just enough to break up the heaviness at the perimeter. Those light layers created movement, which drew the eye upward toward her cheekbones and eyes rather than downward. To finish, we added a soft, side-swept bang that angled beautifully across her forehead, lifting her face and balancing her features. When Susan looked at herself afterward, she gasped. "It's like I've had a facelift without surgery," she said, and this isn't just anecdotal. According to the American Society for Dermatologic Surgery, More than 70% of women over 50 report some level of concern with sagging skin along the jawline. That means if you've ever felt like your haircut makes you look heavier or more tired, you're far from alone. The science of visual perception tells us that horizontal lines draw attention outward, while diagonal or vertical lines guide the eye upward. So when your bob ends bluntly at the chin, it exaggerates horizontal width. But when you add layers and side-swept bangs, you introduce diagonals and softness, which redirect the eye to more youthful features. Here's a question for you. Have you ever looked back at photos of yourself and wondered why a certain haircut you loved in your 30s doesn't feel quite right anymore? That's not your imagination. What flattered your younger bone structure doesn't always serve you the same way decades later. Our faces evolve, and our hair has to evolve with us. Another client of mine, Marjorie, held on to her blunt bob well into her late 50s. She told me it was her signature look. But after years of resisting change, she finally let me adjust the length and add subtle graduation toward the front. The transformation stunned her friends. They didn't say, "Wow, you look younger." They said, "You look so refreshed." And that is exactly the point. The blunt bob isn't bad. It's just unforgiving when it lands at the jawline. By dropping the length slightly below the chin, softening with layers, and incorporating side-swept bangs, you take back control of where the eye goes. Instead of focusing on the areas that concern you, the haircut frames your best features: your smile, your eyes, your cheekbones. It's still the bob you love, but smarter, more elegant, and designed for the beauty you have today, not 20 years ago. As we move forward, keep this in mind. It's rarely about the style itself being wrong, it's about the placement and proportions. A few strategic inches, the right layering, and a thoughtful fringe can completely change how you experience your reflection. And with that perspective, let's explore another cut that many women turn to for freedom and ease, but which also needs a few tweaks to avoid the same pitfalls: the pixie. Hairstyle 2, the too-tight pixie cut. Now let's talk about a hairstyle that feels bold, modern, and liberating: the pixie cut. For many women, choosing a pixie is like making a statement. It says, "I'm ready for something fresh, light, and confident." And in truth, it can be all of those things. But here's where things get tricky. Not all pixie cuts are created equal, and if you're over 50, the wrong variation can actually highlight the very areas you'd like to soften. Have you ever seen a pixie that's been cut very close to the sides and nape, almost like a buzz cut in places? While that look might work beautifully on women with very strong, angular bone structure, it often does mature faces no favors. When the sides are too tight, they strip away softness, leaving the lower half of the face fully exposed. For women dealing with a little sagging skin or a soft jawline, this exposure can draw attention downward and exaggerate the very features they want to downplay. According to a 2022 survey by the American Academy of Facial Aesthetics, nearly 65% of women over 55 listed loss of definition around the jawline as one of their top appearance concerns. When you combine that with a haircut that frames nothing and directs all focus to the lower third of your face, you can see how the effect becomes magnified. I had a client named Linda who came into my salon frustrated after cutting her hair into a very tight pixie. She loved the idea of low maintenance, but every time she looked in the mirror, she said she felt harsher, less feminine. The problem wasn't the pixie itself, it was the execution. We grew out the sides just half an inch, enough to let the hair gently curve in front of her ears. That tiny change softened her cheekbones, redirected the eye upward, and gave her face back its balance. From there, we adjusted the nape. Instead of leaving it square and cropped too short, we tapered it softly, creating a curved line that hugged her neck. Suddenly, her profile looked longer and more graceful. Here's a question for you. Have you ever noticed how certain short cuts make your neck look shorter, while others seem to elongate it? That isn't your imagination. It's the difference between a harsh, square edge and a gentle taper. Curved lines are far more flattering on mature features because they create flow, not abrupt stops. And then we addressed the crown. Adding volume on top of Linda's pixie gave her that subtle lift she was missing. Remember the rule, where the shape goes, the eye follows. Extra height at the crown draws attention upward, away from the jawline, making the entire face appear more youthful and alive. To finish, we added a long, side-swept fringe. Why is that so important? Because a diagonal fringe cuts across the forehead in a way that opens the eyes and softens the lower face. It also balances proportions by widening the upper third of the face, which is key when the lower third is beginning to soften. Short, blunt bangs would have only emphasized width and pulled focus downward, but the side fringe did the opposite. It added elegance and movement. When Linda left that day, she told me, "This finally feels like me again." And that's the beauty of a well-designed pixie. It's not about going drastic, it's about knowing where to leave softness, where to add height, and how to use shape to guide the eye. A pixie cut done thoughtfully can be one of the most flattering, empowering hairstyles for women over 50. It can feel modern, chic, and incredibly elegant without being severe. So, if you've ever tried a pixie and felt disappointed, it might not have been the cut itself. It may have just been missing the balance of length, softness, and lift. And as we move forward, I want to show you another hairstyle that many women hold onto for decades because it feels safe and feminine, but which can sometimes work against you if left unadjusted. Long, heavy, one-length hair. Hairstyle 3. Long, heavy, one-length hair. For many women, long hair feels like a security blanket. It's feminine, familiar, and for decades it may have been part of your signature style. But here's the reality. After 50, wearing hair that is very long, heavy, and all one length can actually drag your appearance down. It might sound surprising because we often think that longer hair hides the areas we feel self-conscious about. Yet the opposite is usually true. When hair is straight, heavy, and falls without interruption, the weight collects at the bottom. That heaviness pulls the eye downward, right toward the jawline, chin, and neck, exactly where many women start to notice softening with age. Think about it this way. The eye naturally follows lines and shapes. If all the volume in your haircut sits below your chin, that's where the attention goes. A 2021 survey by AARP found that 68% of women over 55 said they wished their hairstyle made their face look more lifted. The science behind this is simple. Long, heavy lines emphasize downward pull, while layered, textured shapes encourage upward focus. I'll never forget my client Joanne. She was 64, had always worn her hair long and poker straight, and she told me she thought cutting it would make her feel like she was giving up. But she also admitted that her reflection didn't excite her anymore. She said, "My hair looks fine, but it doesn't make me look fine." When she sat in my chair, the first thing I noticed was how the length of her hair was actually hiding her neckline and weighing down her profile. It wasn't giving her the youthful softness she wanted, it was boxing her in. So, we made adjustments without sacrificing her love for length. I introduced long, face-framing layers that started around her cheekbones and blended down. This immediately opened up her face, creating lightness and movement where before there had only been weight. We added subtle texture, just a soft bend through the mid-lengths. Nothing too styled, just enough to give her hair shape and contrast. That texture added volume at the crown and around the temples, which lifted her entire look. Finally, we introduced curtain bangs that parted softly in the middle and swept to each side. Those bangs drew attention straight to her eyes and smile, balancing out the lower part of her face. When Joanne looked at the finished style, she teared up. She told me, "I feel like I can see myself again." And her friends didn't say, "You cut your hair." They said, "You look so vibrant." That's the power of rebalancing a haircut. It's not about cutting it all off or losing what makes you feel feminine. It's about tweaking the design so it works with your features today. Here's something I often ask my clients, and I'll ask you now. Does your hair feel like it supports your confidence, or does it feel like you're hiding behind it? Sometimes women think keeping their hair long is the safe choice, but safety doesn't always equal flattering. With the right layering, texture, and fringe, long hair can absolutely be gorgeous after 50. It just has to be adjusted to avoid pulling your look downward. The key is this: movement creates lift. A heavy one-length cut creates drag. By breaking up the density, removing some weight from the ends, and letting the hair taper rather than form a block, you transform the entire effect. You still get to keep the length you love, but now it enhances your features rather than working against them. So, if you've been holding on to that one-length style for years, ask yourself if it's still giving you what you want. A small change can make the difference between feeling hidden and feeling radiant. And speaking of small changes with a big impact, in the next part, we're going to pull back and talk about the universal rule that ties all of this together. The golden guideline that explains why certain shapes flatter and others don't. By now, you've seen how small tweaks to a bob, a pixie, or long hair can dramatically change how your features are perceived. But let me step back and give you the universal rule that ties all of this together. Where the volume sits is where the eye goes. It sounds simple, but it explains everything about why some haircuts feel flattering and others don't. Think about it. If the heaviest line of your haircut lands at your jaw, that's where the eye will settle. If your crown is flat, the eye will linger lower on your face. But if we introduce height at the crown, softness around the temples, or movement that lifts toward the cheekbones, suddenly the eye is drawn upward. This shift changes not only how others see you, but how you see yourself when you catch your reflection. Here's something fascinating from a 2020 study published in the Journal of Cosmetic Dermatology. Women who felt their hairstyle drew attention to their eyes, and Smile reported a 43% higher level of self-confidence compared to women who felt their hairstyle highlighted areas of concern like the neck or jawline. In other words, the placement of volume in your haircut doesn't just change your look, it can genuinely change your mood and how you carry yourself. I often share the story of my client Carla, who came to me convinced she needed cosmetic procedures to feel better about her appearance. She had fine hair that she always wore flat and one length. The heaviness sat right at her jaw, which only made her self-conscious about sagging. Instead of jumping to drastic measures, we adjusted her haircut to build subtle volume at the crown and added face-framing layers to shift attention upward. When she looked in the mirror, she whispered, "I feel like I got my spark back." And she hadn't gone under the knife, she had simply redirected the visual focus with a smarter haircut. So here's my question for you. When you style your hair in the morning, where does your eye go first? Do you find yourself staring at your jawline, your neck, or the lines you wish you could hide? If so, it may be less about your face itself and more about the way your haircut is framing it. That's empowering, isn't it? Because it means you can change the story with small, strategic choices. The universal lesson here is not that certain hairstyles are bad. Every style has potential. It's all about proportion, placement, and flow. Hair is the frame for your face, just like a picture frame enhances a painting. The right frame draws attention to the beauty within. The wrong one distracts or competes with it. And unlike the face itself, which changes naturally with time, your haircut is flexible. You can adapt it to celebrate who you are right now. That's why I encourage every woman I work with to think less about chasing youth and more about creating lift, balance, and confidence. You don't need to erase the years, you just need a style that works with them. Once you embrace this mindset, hair becomes not just a part of your look, but a tool for self-expression and empowerment. And with that perspective in mind, let's bring everything together. In the next part, I'll share the bigger life lesson behind all these hairstyle adjustments and why embracing the right cut is about so much more than appearance. It's about stepping into your confidence at any age. At the end of the day, there is no such thing as a bad haircut. Every style has its strengths, and every cut can be beautiful when it's adjusted to complement your face. What matters most is not whether a bob, a pixie, or long hair is trendy, but whether it harmonizes with the features you have today. Hair is not static. It's one of the most flexible tools you have to express who you are, and when it's shaped thoughtfully, it has the power to bring out your best. And here's the bigger truth: aging does not take away beauty. It simply asks us to evolve. It asks us to refine, to adapt, and to celebrate ourselves in new ways. A softened jawline, a gentle curve at the neck, these are not flaws to erase, they are part of your story. By choosing a haircut that lifts, frames, and flows with your natural features, you are not hiding age, you are highlighting strength, elegance, and confidence. So here's my challenge for you. The next time you sit in your stylist's chair, try one small change. Maybe it's adding layers, maybe it's shifting your part, maybe it's introducing a soft fringe. See how even the smallest adjustment can open your face, brighten your eyes, and lift your spirit. And then, share your experience. I would love to hear in the comments what changes you've tried and how they've made you feel. Your story might inspire another woman who is ready to see herself in a new light. Remember this: you deserve a haircut that supports who you are today, not who you used to be. A style that celebrates your present self and allows your beauty to shine exactly as you are. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. If you found these insights helpful, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more tips designed just for women over 50, and share it with a friend who might need a little encouragement. Because every woman deserves to look in the mirror and smile at the reflection she sees.